got the microphone on. We'll see how that goes. Let me get it closer. How's that? All right. So we're here. I got a new microphone. Man, that is really in the way. Jeez. Let me try and fix that. That's super annoying. So hopefully the volume's okay. Let me know if the volume's all right. I got my podcasting microphone. Hopefully that helps out. But I'm counting on you. So I mentioned a special guest before we got started on this rainy day. Pretty quiet? Okay, I'll turn it up. Is that better? That seems like it should be better. Man, my special guest is being so quiet. Like unusually quiet.
Hello?
For this person. All right, good. I'm glad that's better. So it's the hurricane is here, so that means school's canceled, and I have a little friend here. So this is Lincoln. Say hello, Lincoln.
Hello.
Well, you can't hide behind me. It's not much of a live stream if you hide behind me.
What? Well, your son.
Yes, you are my son. So, okay. So Lincoln wanted to say hello because he was home. The hurricane canceled school. So he's here while Daddy's live streaming. So now he's off to hang with his bro. All right. See you, dude.
Bye.
All right. We'll see you. All right. You go watch YouTube.
Have a fun time.
Yeah, have a fun time.
Work is very boring.
So he just declared this is boring. All right. Well, that's life. All right. So sorry for that diversion. That was my fatherly duty. I promised him he could be on stream today. So there he is. Lincoln made his big debut. All right. So first word of warning. We are rolling through a hurricane here. Hurricane Michael is coming right over us. So hopefully power and internet stays on. If things drop out and I don't come back, you'll know why. So that's what's going on here on my end. If there's any questions, feel free to pop them in chat. On the right side, if you're on the web or desktop, if you're on mobile, it usually is below. Also, if you have not followed, I ask you to hit that follow button up above my head. That's, as you see, I'm tracking that to see how much traction we get here with what we're doing. I've been super happy with the engagement over the past couple of weeks. So thank you to everybody that's been a part of that. Not only people that are online, but people that watch it after. So Lori Blue peppered me with like 17 messages this morning. It was fantastic as I read through all of her comments from the last stream. So thank you, Lori. That means a ton to me. And one of the things that I'm going to try and carry through, both through this live stream and the podcast that you may have seen episode 134 go live this morning, is it's October. It's Halloween. So we're trying to deal with scary topics. One of the things that came up that Lori threw out actually was those scary topics of what happens when you have to give somebody some bad news. So you're a team, and that forecast that you published out, you said you were going to be done in 2 months. After you dig a little bit further into it, you realize it's going to take 3 months. So what do you do? How do you tackle that? How do you deal with that? That's one of those challenging situations that everybody runs into. Unfortunately, more often than not, but it is one of those things where it's your responsibility to inform the organization of a change. Maybe that change is good, maybe that change is bad, but you do have a responsibility to let people know because there's a large group of people that are relying on you and your team to deliver. And what you want to get to is you want to get to an organization where that change is okay and you just roll with it. But it just starts with having the courage to step in and say, hey, here's what's going on, here's why. And the thing that I always ask teams to do is, okay, don't always come with a problem. So the best thing that you'll find is that if you come to whoever you need to talk to with a solution, a potential solution, doesn't have to be the perfect solution, but if you come with a solution and say, okay, here's the problem, here's what's going on, here's where we're at, here's some ideas that we think can help us work around it, work through it, make things better. Always bring ideas to the table. Don't just set a giant mess on the table and run away. Say like, hey, it's your problem now. That's never a good situation. So spend time thinking about options that you and your team can do, or maybe the organization can make to make some adjustments. So that's always the best thing you can do is don't drop a big pile of mess on somebody's table and walk out and be like, go get them, chief. You got to come in with ideas and options and then use that same dialogue, just like you have that dialogue in backlog refinement or backlog grooming, whatever you call it. That healthy dialogue is the thing that drives towards the best answer you can get. So that's always the thing that I push for teams to do, is that when you have to deliver bad news, deliver bad news with options. So that's my quick spiel on thoughts and ideas of how to handle those difficult situations. So if anybody's got any questions out there, any problems they're wrestling with at work, where things aren't going as smoothly as they'd like, I'm here to help. Chat's here to help. Chat's been fantastic, so thank you to everyone that's been a part of that. Really appreciative of everybody, as all Agile Coach circles go, jumping in and throwing out ideas and supporting each other and everything that goes along with that. So that's the beauty of this. That's why I do this. Cool. So hit me up with questions. If not, I can keep going down the bad news train. that's one of those things. So there's all kinds of bad news. There's the project is behind schedule. We just lost a great teammate. What are you going to do about it? That's always one of those things that's always the toughest, because now there's multiple people that are having to wrestle with that. So how do you deal with it? Again, always come in with how you handle bad situations by, here's a suggestion for how we can make this better. All right. Cullen Andy, I hope I pronounced that right. Is it Andy Cullen? Is that your name? Or Cullen Andy? Or Cullen and Y? Okay, so you've got a question around limited resources. So a DB guy who is resourced to my Scrum team, but also has other projects he's responsible to support. Ooh, culinary Andy. Wow. Okay. We're going to come visit you. That's exciting. That's a cool skill that I can tell you I don't have. Congratulations. My wife would be very jealous. So limited shared resources. So it is shared. Yep. Okay. So it is shared. The question that I have around that is, how is that DB guy's backlog managed? Does he have clarity across all the backlogs, across all the teams that he's supported in, or are different teams doing different things? I've seen decent success with shared resources as long as teams plan accordingly. Because what should happen is that DB guy should have a personal capacity that he can know, that he can look at. So he should know, I'm good for about 10 points a sprint, and I'm going to work with my boss and the team leads, or whoever's helping to lead the charge there, figure out the best place to allocate my 10 points per sprint. So try and find a way to get that person to understanding what their personal capacity is from a points perspective, and then work with them or their boss, and really with the product team. It should be a part of your backlog around how important is this. And this DB work has major dependencies on it. So there's this new story I, as a product owner, want over here on this team, but it's got a dependency on some database work. So that should travel with that. That should, in the end, all of the work should be stacked up in one giant backlog. That's the ultimate goal that I have when I lead organizations and not just teams, is that we have an uber backlog of all the work, and that we are working on the most important things in order. Because it's not always going to be nice and clean and smooth, where if you have 3 teams, 33% of your backlog fits nicely into each of their grooves and the things that they do well and things that they do best. So the way I tackle that is to have an uber backlog, or a backlog where I know and can see everything all at once and can deal with that. Another tool that we've used to help clarify that is what I call a PSI plan. So we, for each team, build out a forecast around the next 6 sprints of what they're going to do, and that helps to highlight and show those dependencies that we talked about. So the sooner you get visibility onto those dependencies, the more likely you're going to be able to juggle them effectively. So the way that we did that, because we had what we called chapters, we borrowed from Spotify. We had a front end chapter and a back end chapter, and they were responsible for the architectural work, much like this person you have, to build the underlying technology that's required to support the features the product team is asking for. So the way that we worked to plan that out was every month we would build out a forecast of what we thought the next 6 sprints would look like. In doing that, you start to gain visibility of dependencies and those pinch points where things are going to get sticky and things are going to get tough and things are going to get hard to plan out, and you can start to see it 4 or 5 sprints out, 3 sprints out, and you have time to react to it and figure out what the right order to do things in. So at that point, you can start to think about how you're going to allocate that person. So number 1, understand his personal capacity. Number 2, try and keep a clear Uber backlog of really what all of the features are, or epics, or whatever you call them, what that order looks like, so you can allocate that time appropriately. And then to give you capability to do that well, I've had real success with that PSI board where, again, for the next 6 sprints, we forecast out what we think we can do, and that's informed by the product owners of the things that they believe are most important for us to build and ship to our customers. So that's how I've tackled it in the past. So those are 3 keys that I would suggest. And I can tackle that PSI view a little bit later, because that's something that's been very helpful for us. Yeah, Andy. So that's exactly it. And it's not necessarily that they work ahead. The real value that I've seen is that not the work ahead, but the look ahead. So that look ahead allows them to, maybe they aren't working on those stories yet, but they aren't in such a reactive mode. They're so often where folks in that situation get stuck in a reactive mode because their sprints get planned last minute. And database and architecture and things like that are hard. And it's even harder to get right and to make it scalable and maintainable and everything that goes along with that. So the real value that I see in that approach is that look ahead that they have, that they can start mentally processing, okay, so I'm going to have to architect a whole new approach to how we store our non-relational data, because this new requirement we have coming in is an absolute beast and SQL Server is not going to get it done, or whatever the situation might be. So the key is you get them out of that reactive mode and more in the proactive mode, and that quarter-long view of what you're asking the teams to build allows them to look ahead and figure out what they need to put in place to enable the teams to be successful. So in that mode, what happens is that DB guy or the architect or whatever role it might be that's shared really starts to work in a mode where the teams are their customer, and they're trying to build and ship tools that enable their customer to run faster. Just like your team is building products that enable their customer to run faster, your DB guy or architect, whatever it might be, needs that. But just like any team, they need a good, well-refined, healthy backlog with enough look ahead to get out of that reactionary mode. So that's the thing that you've got to do. And those 3 tools that I mentioned are ways that I've enabled folks in that position to get some sort of look ahead instead of always just being in reaction of, okay, so what am I doing this sprint? All right, I'll go figure that out. And they do the best they can, but that's just a challenging situation. Fire Sue, she's here. Yeah. Yep. Raleigh or Rally. I'm trying to figure out the right way to say it. Yeah, so that PSI, for those of you that may have not heard of that, I think Safe actually calls it just PI now. So 3-ish years ago, I found myself in a situation where we were building a process, a team, and a product from scratch. And that was an exciting, fun challenge. And one of the things that happened is we had this rapid growth. So we had all these teams running in parallel, and how did we have them in sync? And we had architects, and we had front end chapters and back end chapters, which were essentially an extended architect role. So we started to figure out how we corral these things. And when I came on board, I had been told that we were adopting Safe. And I said, no, we're not. We're not adopting Safe. We don't need Safe yet. And we went to a Safe training class. And while I don't believe Safe is appropriate for everyone to blindly apply, there were some really fantastic things that I saw in Safe that we implemented as a part of our process at the Dude. And one of them was their potentially shippable increment planning. They also call it big room planning. The thing that I did a twist on it was that Safe says that you do that once a quarter. So they do this thing. They prescribe you to take your team and for 2 days, once a quarter, go and build this super backlog plan for the next 3 months. You spend about a day of the product team standing up in front of everybody saying, here's the things we'd like to have built in the next quarter. And then the team goes off and works through and pulls their hair out and figures out, okay, here's the forecast of what we think we can do in the next quarter. Cool, makes sense. The thing that I valued most about that was the frequency with which the product team stood up in front of our organization, my organization, the software engineering organization, and said, here's an updated list of priorities of where we want to go as a product. That was something I hadn't seen in a lot of places, and I really loved that. So I wanted to bring that to who we were and how we operated. So instead of doing it once a quarter, I said, let's do it once a month. Because we're in a situation where there's a ton of change. We're going fast. We're building fast. We're in an evolutionary market. There's lots of things going on. We need to be able to react. And I didn't feel like, and my peer, the VP on the product side, we both didn't feel like putting a plan in place for 3 months and just rolling with that. It's like we're essentially doing waterfall, just on a smaller version. So we adopted most of what their PSI or PI plan, as they talk about now, and we did that, but we just did it once a month. And the cool thing was, because I could not imagine that big room planning situation where I take my entire team and the product team and everybody else around that, and we go in some giant room for 2 days. Like, I would just hate life. So part of it was I felt like there was no way I could do that. And we got to a point where we could do our PSI planning across 7 teams in about 90 minutes. So that came about because we had a fantastic backlog. We had a really great product team that was able to clarify that. And you know what? We had that consistent view. So when you have some idea of what's coming down the pipeline, things get less scary and you become more confident with your forecasts and your ideas, and you're able to react and build that infrastructure to support those feature requests. So PSI has been fantastic for me. I'm actually working on a talk where I talk about it being the connective tissue between the two backlogs that most companies have. They generally have a roadmap for 12, 24, 36 months that looks like this, and then you have your sprint backlog. But there's this giant chasm between the two that things don't flow very smoothly from the roadmap to the sprint backlog. So we injected that PSI plan, and that was what I call the connective tissue that allows those two to stay in sync and allows ultimately the team to be effective. So that's a huge approach that we adopted and made our own at the Dude, and it's been fantastic. I've carried it with me where I've left, where I've gone and worked, companies I coach. that's the first thing I bring in with me. There's people that I've worked with that have gone on and moved on, and they've brought that with them. It sounds like Fire Sue. Sue, are you working with part of PSI? It sounds like you are based on your comments. So I would love to hear how things are going for you. Any challenges that you may have around that would be fantastic to hear. So once again, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in chat. If you don't have any questions and you haven't done it already, please hit the follow button up there. That is fantastic. And if you haven't done any of that, one thing I ask you to do, I think Andy is relatively new. I don't remember questions from Andy. If you have friends or anyone you think could get value out of this, please share it with them. My goal here is to affect positively as many people as possible, both with me sitting here in front of this microphone and camera, but also everyone within the chat. So I'm just trying to build a community where we help as many people as possible, and that can't happen without you sharing the thoughts and ideas that we're discussing about here. So I thank you in advance for spreading the word. Sue was one of the first people to do that, so I appreciate that greatly. And I'm glad to hear that you're using something like PSI in Dallas. Oh no, you met Bob, Andy? Bob and I recorded an episode of our Metacast yesterday, and he was mentioning that he was in Ann Arbor, and as you can see, I'm wearing a Cincinnati shirt. That's where I went to college. I've got an issue with Ohio State, and he and I spoke in Columbus, earlier in the summer, and he could just see just the angst and frustration I had about being there. And he told me he was in Ann Arbor not too long ago, and he said, I had to tell a Josh story about us being in Columbus. So I'm happy he landed in a better situation in Ann Arbor than in Columbus. So there's a lot of cool things going on in Columbus, but I am not an Ohio State fan. So glad to hear he was in a better spot. Would have been better if he was in Cincinnati, but that's okay. We'll get him there. I'll get back there. Cool. So we're rolling along pretty well today. Let's see. So there are no questions. I got a ton of ideas from Lori that I'll just dig through real quick. All right, so we talked about, Lori had ideas around scary news to management. We talked about that. If you joined late, my big suggestion there is bring options to the table. Don't just walk in and, again, lay a big mess in front of that person and say, oh, well, we got this problem. I'm out. I'm going to go figure something else out. Don't do that. Okay. So Sue then wanted to, not Sue, Lori Blue and Sue. Lori Blue and Fire Sue. Well, that's going to be a challenge for me. The rhyming is going to mess my brain up. So Lori Blue was asking about scary organizational structures that slow down transformations, like scary non-people-centric hiring practices, non-agile annual reviews, and bonus systems. So I'll tell you a story about a definitely non-traditional bonus strategy that I put in place at Dude Solutions. When I was there, we had a relatively standard bonus approach where everybody got a certain percentage and it was allocated per manager, and every manager had to decide how to allocate that individually. So for every person, we had to say, well, you get X percent, you get X percent, and you had to, appropriately so, provide reasoning on why. And that went against many of the ideals that we were trying to put in place around being team centric, and that we all win together, we all lose together. So I had our enterprise architect came to me with, at the time, what felt like a wildly crazy idea of, why don't we let the team do a fist of five vote on how they think they did over the year, and use that to inform us of what the bonuses would be. So we were relatively comfortable with the fist of five as something that we do throughout the process. We would do it at the end of sprint planning, at the end of PSI planning, sometimes in the middle of a sprint after a stand-up. So if you don't know, fist of five planning is essentially where you vote on your confidence in the current situation. So it's similar to planning poker, at least how we do it. When we do planning poker, it's just like rock, paper, scissors. We go 1, 2, 3, and you throw your number of, hey, I think this is a 3. Well, in fist of five, we go 1, 2, 3, and you throw a number. And you really have 6 options, because you can throw 5, means this is fantastic and we should keep doing the thing we're doing and never stop doing it ever again. And then you have 0, which is, this is probably the worst thing we've ever done and we should never ever do it again. And then you have the variations in between. So that was something that was common. It was in the vernacular of how we talked. We would say, well, let's do a fist of five. It just was a common thing of how we would get a good idea around the pulse of how the team thought things were going. And I really, at the end of the day, felt like it was a reasonable option for us to put in front of the team. So I gathered all 60 people or so in our room, and I explained the situation. And I said, okay, here's how we're going to do this. And here's why this is so important to me. It was important to me because it showed we are one, but also I wanted to extend the trust to the entire team that we're all in this together. And also, the thing that I really wanted to see was, did we have a safe environment? Did we have a safe environment where somebody could throw a low number, knowing it directly affected paychecks, bonus checks for them and their peers? Did they feel safe enough to throw a 2 instead of a 4, knowing that I was going to take that and essentially use it as a calculation applied on the potential bonus that they could get? In the end, my hopes and dreams were validated. We did have a person that threw a 2. There were no tables that were flipped. There were some hard questions that were asked, but those hard questions were asked in a safe, constructive manner, and they were responded to in a similar way. And that made my year. That's when I knew that we had made it. That's when I knew that this group of 60 people we had in the right spot. We were going in the right direction, and we were basically going to be unstoppable at that moment. Because when we got there, I know, okay, we're in great shape. So just like with planning poker, where you have a few rounds, we had a few rounds. And we narrowed in on what was right. I didn't do it blindly at, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I ended up picking an average. I think we ended up at around like a 3.6 was the average across the team. And then I used that to factor in. And the thing is, everybody walked out of there with a clear understanding of what the bonus was going to be, why, and more importantly, a clear understanding that if we all work together and we get better and we prove ourselves to each other, then we'll probably get some more money in our bonus next time. So having that turn inside instead of outside, of let's get better for each other, that changed the game for us. And it turned out we did that over and over again, and it worked. Now, I didn't tell anybody in HR. I didn't tell my boss. I didn't tell anybody that's how we were doing that. I still filled out the form individually, So no one knew. But again, I felt that was the most appropriate, most agile, team-centric way to tackle that scary, non-agile, traditional bonus approach. So that worked. It worked well for me. It wasn't one of those things like, oh boy, here we go. This could go really well, or it could go really bad. And luckily, it turned out to be okay. It turned out to be pretty positive. So I was happy about that. Okay. Let's see. Go back to Lori Blue unless we've got any more idea generators out there or any questions out there. All right. So something that came up in a Slack channel, an Agile Slack channel that I'm in here. It was the concept of project managers and scrum masters working together. So we talk about scary organizational structures in place that could make an agile transformation difficult. That is certainly one of those things. And a good friend of mine, Richard Core, who was an agile coach with us at the Dude, talked about the core principles of what those two roles do and how they operate. And when you think about project managers and the celebrated project managers, they are the ones that grab a project by the scruff of the neck and drag it across the finish line, come hell or high water. However they do it, whatever miracle pixie dust they have to make that happen, whatever death march they put the team on, they're the ones that drag that across the finish line. And they do it in a very command and control manner, at least the ones I've seen that have been effective at their job. It's not how I would work. It's not the way I would run an organization, but there are many that operate in that way, and it works for them. It's not for me, but that's okay. And if you think of Scrum Master and Agile, it's pretty much diametrically opposed to that. So how can an organization exist with those two roles at once? And I don't believe they really can in a healthy manner. Yes, they'll get by, but in the end, it's going to get down to, are we agile or are we not? And if we are agile, that project management role really doesn't add a ton of value because the team ends up managing the project by itself. Instead of being a top-down thing, it's more of a bottom-up. So if you come into a situation and there's project managers and agile coaches and scrum masters, that's one of those agile smells that you got to start to look. And I would ask around and be like, okay, are we committed to being agile or are we not? Because in reality, having those two roles in unison, you're trying to walk this fine line of, I want to be both. And you can't really be both. You either are agile or going agile and you're committed to it and you're progressing in that direction, or you're whatever manner that you rolled with before, typically waterfall. So that's where, as an agile coach, I would start asking questions of leadership, executives, management, whatever it may be, and start to really peel back that onion and understand how committed they are to an agile process. Now, maybe it's one of those things and there's a transformation, and oftentimes they're trying to help those project managers find a new role, either internally or externally. And you may find that out and you'd be like, okay, cool, I got it. I'm on board. I'll give it 6 months because these are good people. They've done great work for us in the past, and we want to find a new role for them. And it's going to take time. That doesn't happen overnight. So at that point, you need to be in support of it. But I have a hard time envisioning where those two roles effectively doing their jobs coexist in a healthy manner, because they are coming at solving the same problem from opposite ends of the spectrum. So that's a huge challenge, and I'm just not sure how you effectively make that happen. So if anybody has any ideas or any experience rolling with those two roles and having them be effective, work well together, add value to each other, please share it in chat, because I would love to see that. I would love to understand things that you've done or put in place to make that happen, because that is one of those very common situations of we're transforming from this to that, and there's people that are in this role, and we haven't found them a new role, or we haven't decided what role to put them in, so we just leave it there. And that's kind of like the worst situation for everybody involved, because there's this weird limbo that people live in. Like, okay, so what am I doing? Am I gonna transition into a new role, or do they value me? What's going on? So that's one of those things where I would initially have a good conversation with whoever's making the decisions around hiring and roles and staffing, and get an understanding of what their plan is. So that's one of those scary things that's out there. Hopefully you guys have figured that out and can educate me, because I would love to know and share that with some folks. Okay. So non-agile annual reviews. Yeah, Sue, you are right. And that's one of those things that when I go into... Oh, I will stay dry, Sue. Thank you. Take care of yourself down there in Dallas. Good luck with everything. Thanks for stopping by. Yeah, it is one of those things where, as an Agile coach, ask those questions. Ask those questions up front around role transformation and what kind of support mechanisms are in place for the people that are in roles that should not exist in the current situation. Make sure there's a clear understanding of how the organization is going to help them in all the right ways. If they don't have a good answer, that's one of those things you really need to lean on folks to get them to answer, because people will leave, good people will leave, because they're not given a clear path on what their future looks like. And that's really what people want. People are dying to know, if I stay here, how does it help me grow? And if, as a part of the transformation, it's not clarified where I can go, how I can get there, then people are going to walk, and nobody wants good people to walk. So that's one of those things that, if you're leading a transformation, that's one of those sneaky things that will come up and bite you, because you're so focused on process and what tool are we going to use and all these different things, when in reality, you got to flip that and get the people taken care of first. And you'll be amazed. Smart people with a big problem will always win. As long as there's clarity, right? You've got to get clarity, just like you ask clarity from your product team to provide clarity and requirements and stories, everything goes along with that. Get whoever leads the hiring process or HR side of the house, push them to provide the same clarity to the team as you push the product team to provide around the products that they're building. So that's one of those things, that's that next level coaching you got to think of. All right, so last thing I'm going to tackle, unless there's any questions. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to hang around until it'll be 4 o'clock my time. Annual reviews. So they definitely can be very agile. I've found a way to make them agile. And what I do with every person in our organization is we run personal sprints. And they're one-on-one meetings with whoever their manager is, if it's me or a director or a manager or whatever it might be. Their one-on-one meetings are really their sprint transitions. So we go through very similar ceremonies. We review what happened since we met last. We talk about the backlog of things we're trying to accomplish, the things we're trying to accomplish in this sprint. Maybe it's a month long. Maybe you meet every 2 weeks. Maybe you meet once a month. So we talk about short-term goals, long-term goals. We start planning a path of what we're going to do in the next month, if it's a monthly one-on-one, or every 2 weeks. These next 2 weeks, what we're going to do to help get that person there, to help get that person to where they want to be. Because as I mentioned, people are dying to find a way to know how being there, how spending their 8, 9, 10 hours a day, whatever it might be, with you at your company, how it's going to progress them towards wherever they want to be. And if you can show them a path and show them that you are supporting them and you have a process in place that supports them, and there's a good healthy dialogue that supports their growth, and you support their growth, and you put things in place and you enable them, retention will never be an issue. Because people see, just like your customers want to see new exciting things. Employees want to see new exciting things for their career. So when it gets to an annual review, there should be zero surprises. Because in that sprint transition, in that one-on-one meeting, that's where all the messy, hairy stuff should come up. There should be no surprises. You should have talked about it at least 12 times, maybe 24, maybe 26, whatever the frequency is. So if you do it well, an agile or an annual review in a truly agile organization, much like the bonus discussion that I talked about, becomes just a matter of paperwork. And again, at that point, everybody knows what the answers are, and it's just paperwork at that point. So that's how I've tackled those two traditionally non-agile HR scary problems of annual reviews, annual bonuses. I still fill out the paperwork like it's old school, but the way we operate underneath the covers is in a way more agile process that provides the things that Agile is intended to provide. Transparency, short feedback loops, open and honest dialogue, right? All those things we just package up nicely, and we have those discussions along the way. And then, okay, I go as a boss, I go fill out the paperwork, and we're done. So those are two approaches I've taken to two of the scary organizational structures that slow down agile transformations. So I hope that was effective for everybody. Lori, I know you'll let me know after you listen to this if I answered your questions. I hope I did. Andy, thanks for coming. Happy to have you. Welcome. As I sign off, a couple things here. If you have not already, please hit that follow button at the top. It may look like a heart. That will notify you every time we go live. And it will keep you informed of as things go on. So every Tuesday, 10 a.m. Eastern, Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern as well for about an hour. We do have guests. Bob has been on. We're working on, I think Tuesday next week, we're going to have Bob. I'm working out logistics with Bob. I think we're going to be able to make that happen. And I'm working on a bit of a roadshow. So trying to travel around local companies here and get different people involved in the stream. So just looking to add value. And if you have any thoughts, opinions, or anything, please reach out either in chat or you can message or whisper me directly in chat. I'd be happy to help out in any way. All right. So first and foremost, thanks for coming. Happy to have you. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks all.